welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you my mid-year top 10. I've been obsessed with watching these videos. I love making them as well. If you have a mid-year top 10 or mid-year favorites or whatever, leave it in the description box below because I would love to go check it out. Before we jump into the top 10, let's talk a little bit of business. I have a couple of things to mention. First of all, I'm trying a new filming angle, which means that I have to do everything opposite to the way that I usually do it. I usually use my right hand for everything, and I have to use my left hand and standing. It's awkward. So if there's any awkwardness in the next videos, you have to excuse it. Second of all, if you've missed my relaunch celebration and giveaway video, you can find that up here and in the description box below. You should go check it out to enter the giveaway because the giveaway closes on Tuesday. I think the 10th is a Tuesday. It closes on July 10th, which I believe is a Tuesday. So don't miss out on your chance because I would love one of you to win the giveaway prize. And lastly, it has to do with my top 10. So I have 11 because I had a really hard time narrowing it down to 10. So my number 10 has a tie between two books because I thought they were pretty similar and I like them both equally. The rest of them are more or less rated from lowest to highest, but it might not be perfect. This was tough this year. Last year I had an easy time. This year was tough. The way that I've picked these books is also not necessarily based on the rating that I gave them, because some of these were not the highest rated books, but they were the books that stuck with me the most and the books that I look back and enjoyed the most. But let's be done with all that talking and start talking about the top 10. So starting with my tie for number 10, my 10 and 11 technically, I have a tie between two books, and those two books are Eleanor, Olifant is Completely Fine by Gail, Honeyman, and A Man Called Uva by Frederick Backman. Both of these books got 4 stars. Eleanor Olifant is about this woman who has had a really rough go in childhood, and her mom was very abusive emotionally and physically, and she's been through some serious childhood trauma, and in order to be able to overcome that, she sort of has this rigid way of living life. And I personally think that she also has a little bit of autism, but it doesn't necessarily mention that in the book. But she sort of doesn't know how to interact socially with people until she meets a man named Raymond and a man named Sammy, and they sort of build up this friendship and they force her more or less to enter society and learn how to actually have friends. This book was a beautiful book. It wasn't necessarily the most complex book that I've read, but you just fall in love with Eleanor, and I love a book that makes you so immersed in the lives of your characters that you just love them from the get-go. The same thing goes with A Man Called Uva. This is about a grumpy old man who has had a really rough life. He ends up meeting some of his neighbors who, like old Eleanor Olifant, push him into having some conversations with people, into doing things that he necessarily wouldn't normally do, and you just fall in love with all the characters. I thought both of these books were incredible. If you like character-driven books and you have not yet read these, I recommend them. By the way, for more information on any of these books, I will leave all the wrap-ups that I talked about these books in the description box below, so you can go find out more of my thoughts and opinions. Coming in at number 9 was Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nuevel. I actually did this one on an audiobook, and had I not done it on an audiobook, I probably wouldn't have liked the book quite as much. But this is a book that's told through interviews and journal entries, sort of like Illuminate, but not. This one is about a girl who falls into a hole, essentially, and she falls into this giant hand. And 17 years later, they're finding more parts to this giant, what seems like a robot. And so this story follows the discovery of this robot and the process of building it and trying to figure out what it is. It was very interesting, especially for the audiobook. I recommend you listen to this one on audio while you read the book because it was done with a full cast and it just made the experience so much interesting. I gave this one a 4 stars. Coming in at number 8 was Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. This one follows a black nurse, and she is on duty when a white supremacist couple is having a child, and they ask her not to be present in the process of the birth of her child until something happens. There's an emergency that happens, and she does end up being in the nursery with the child for a small amount of time, and during that time the child passes away, and so the couple is suing her for negligence and a whole bunch of other things. This book was an interesting one. I meant to make a spoiler-free review on it, and I probably should have, but I ended up giving this one a 5 stars, and later I bumped it down to a 4.25, 4.5 stars. I talk a lot about this in my wrap-up, so go check that out, but this one was a topic that I thought was really well done. Jodi Picoult talks about how she wrote this for the middle class white woman, and I think in that aspect she did a really good job. I probably would have given this book a little bit of a lower rating because it wasn't her best book, but I did read the author's notes, and after reading those I saw that she actually really did accomplish what she meant to do, and I think in that aspect it was very much well done. Again, I had a lot to say about this book, so go check out that wrap up if you want to know more about what I personally thought about it. I did think it was really great, which is why it came in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This one is one of the books that got a lower rating than the rest, but it still ended up being on my top 10. I really did enjoy this book, but I only ended up giving it a 3.75 stars because the author made derogatory comments about obesity that I think he was trying to use to be funny, and I didn't find it funny. I don't think that's something that you could joke about. Again, I talk all about this in my spoiler-free speed review, so go check that out as well. But I did enjoy this book. I'm sort of gonna forgive the comments in hopes that the second book doesn't have them, or it has some kind of purpose for the growth of the character. If the author doesn't correct this problem, you probably won't be seeing this book on my yearly top 10, which is a shame because I think the book was fantastic. Coming in at number 6 is Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This one was fantastic. I actually have a new obsession with book about fae. Anyway, this one follows a girl named Jude, and Jude is one of 3 sisters. One day this fairy comes in and murders her parents and claims that her oldest sister Vivian is actually his child and she's half fae, and he brings the children to fairy where they have to accept their new life. Now we're several years later and Jude is going through a really hard time. Number 1, because she still lives with this guy who she's seen as a father because it's the only father figure that she's known for the last however many years it's been, but she's also having a lot of trouble being accepted in fairy because she's a human, she's immortal, and people are picking on her. It's more complicated than that, but I really love this book. I gave it a 4 stars. Coming in at number 5 is Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the 4th book in the Lunar Chronicle series. I meant to read this book for so long and I finally did it, and it was really great. It was a wonderful conclusion to the Lunar Chronicles series. I gave this one a 5 stars for those of you who don't know what the Lunar Chronicles are. It is a series of 4 books. There are some short novellas and some other books that go in between, but the 4 main books are Cinder, Scarlet, Cress, and Winter, and each of those are a retelling of a fairy tale. Cinder is the story of Cinderella, Scarlet is Little Red Riding Hood, Cress is Rapunzel, and Winter is Snow White. I thought that I wouldn't like the series, but I did. I thought that they would be very predictable because I know the fairy tales. It was not, and this was a phenomenal conclusion. Coming in at number 4 is All Are Wrong Todays by Elan Mastai. Guys, I don't hear enough people talking about this book. It was so good. If you like science fiction, sort of parallel universe books, and you haven't read this one, you need to go read it. I loved this book. This one got a 4.5 stars from me. This one follows a guy named Tom, and Tom comes from 2017, but the 2017 that they thought we would have in the 50s and 60s, sort of like the Jetsons style 2017. Tom wants to go back into the 1960s to observe the event that changed the world, that made all the inventions possible that are now in his 2017, but he screws up the timeline, and so he ends up back in 2017, but our 2017, and so he's dealing with the ramifications of that. This book blew my mind, not only because it had the parallel universes, but it was a whole lot of internal struggle that I can't really tell you anything about. Let's just say at the end I was sort of confused, but like a good confused, not a bad confused. I just wasn't expecting what happened at the very end of the book, and it just went so good. If you have not read All Are Wrong Todays, go read it. I listened to this one on the audiobook, which was read by Elan Mastai himself, which was really great. Only downside is there was a whole chapter just full of curse words, so don't listen to it if you have children in the room. Number 3 is actually a middle grade book. Can you believe it? I don't read a whole lot of middle grade books because I don't usually like them, but this one was so good. And that's The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell by Colfer. I actually don't have the first one because I loved it so much that a friend of ours is borrowing it. We read it as a family. My kids loved it. My husband and I loved it. We weren't allowed to read it with not everybody being present because everybody was just so invested in the story. This follows a set of twins named Alex and Connor, and they discover this magical storybook that they're given from their grandmother, and they fall into Storyland, which is this whole combination of all these different fairy tales so good. The character development was so wonderful, but what I love the most about this story is that it had such wonderful life lessons for kids, but for adults too. I talked a lot about this. I have a whole book review on this book, the first one, The Wishing Well, and it was fantastic. It got 5 stars. Go read it. It was wonderful. Coming in at number 2 was A Conjuring of Light by Victoria Schwab. This is another one that I put off for so long because of its size, and I was kicking myself because this book was so good. This is the 3rd book to the Gathering of Shadows series. If you have not yet read them, please go read them. The first one, for me personally, and for a lot of people that I know, was tough to get into. The second one was so much better, and this book was like, it was perfection. It was perfection. But obviously this one got 5 stars. If you have read A Dagger of Shade of Magic and it wasn't your thing, try the next book, A Gathering of Shadows, because it gets so much better. And coming in at 1 should be no surprise if you've seen my mid-year book freakout tag, and that is Gemina by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. This was my favorite book in the series. It was so good. I liked the characters better in this one than in Illuminae. Don't get me wrong, I loved the characters in Illuminae, but I like these ones a little bit more. What I liked about this book is that I'm not a huge fan of horror books. Actually, I'm not at all. I don't like reading them. I never read them. This one had a little bit of that horror element where it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but I wasn't scared. It wasn't like, it wasn't nightmare worthy, although it could be, but I didn't have nightmares from this one. It was really, really, really lovely. If you haven't read the Illuminae files yet, go read them. I'm not going to tell you what they are because you all know. Alright, so that wraps it up for my mid-year top 10/11 books. Let me know down below in the comments what was your favorite book that you've read so far this year, because I've got a TBR to build for the second half of the year, and if things keep going the way that they've been going, I am very excited for some wonderful books to read. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't yet, I'd love for you to subscribe. Don't forget to check out the giveaway video and enter the giveaway because Tuesday is the deadline. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.